ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, here is the Will Sleeps Not retelling of the wonderful story by Edgar Allan Poe, The Telltale Heart, a classic. So, true, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous had I been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease has sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled. Above all, for the sense of hearing acute, I hear all things in the heaven and in the earth. I hear many things in hell. How, then, am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man, and he had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold, I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, that was it. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degree, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Hold on, I need to definitely change. I need to go to this. There you go. A little bit more evil. I'm not crazy, you're crazy. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I perceived, with such caution, with such foresight, with what dissemination I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I would put a dark lantern, closed so that no light shone out, and then thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved slowly, very, very slowly, that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinge creaked. And I undid it just so much that a single ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquired how he had passed the night. For you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious to open the door. A watch's minute hand moved more quickly than mine did. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of the sagecy. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph, to think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. Perhaps he heard me, for he moved in his bed suddenly, as if startled. Now, you might think that I drew back, but no. His room was black as pitch with the thick darkness. for the shutters were closed, fastened, though through fear of robbers. And so I knew he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing in, steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprung up in the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lay down. He was sitting up in bed, listening, just as I had done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Perhaps, or presently, I heard a slight groan. I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. It was not the groan of pain or of grief, oh no! It was a slow, stifled sound that rose from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, was welled up in my own bosom, deepening, with its dreadful echo, the terrors that distracted me. I say I know it well. I knew the old man felt it, and pitied him, though I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had never had been laying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned in his bed. His fear had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, it is nothing but the wind in the chimney, only a mouse crossing the floor, nor it is merely a cricket that made a single chirp. Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these superpositions. But he had found all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of an unprecedented or unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, though he never saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lay down, I resolved to open a very, very little, crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until a length of a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out of the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I glanced upon it. I saw its perfect distinctness, all a dull blue with the hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And now, have I not told you of what you mistake for madness is but an acuteness of the senses? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I know that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried out steady to keep. I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meanwhile, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now, at the dead hour of night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet, for some minutes longer, I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound must be heard by the neighbors. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. He screeched once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pushed the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for a few minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. Then I took up 3 planks from the floors of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so carefully, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash away, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too weary for that. A tub had caught it all. Ha ha! When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been logged at the police station, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was one of my own dream. The old man, I mentioned, was sent to the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bid they search well. I led them at length to his chambers. I showed them his treasure, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, with wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerfully, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself growing pale and wishing them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued to gain definition. Until, at length, I found the noise was not within my ears. No doubt now I had grown pale, but I talked more frantically with a heightened voice. If the sound continued, what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound of a watch made when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for air, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently. But the noise steadily increased. I rose and argued for trifles, in a high key and with violent gestations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the room to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men. But the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I sat, and grated upon the boards. The noise arose all over and continuously increased. It grew louder, louder, louder. And still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they did not hear? Almighty God, no, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. And anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerant than this suffering. I could bear their hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt like I might scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder, 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 louder! Villains! I screeched. Disassemble no more! I admit the deed! Tear up the planks here! 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 It's the beating of his hideous heart! And that is The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. Alone by Edgar Allan Poe. From childhood's hour I have not been, as others were I have not seen, as others saw I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I had not taken, my sorrow I could not awaken. My heart to joy at the same tone. All I've loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life was drawn. From every depth of good or ill, the mystery which binded me still. From the torrent or from the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled, in the autumn hint of gold. From the lightning in the sky, as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. We'll go back to spooky, I promise. Here we go. Now we're going to be reading The Conqueror Worm. It's a short one. By Edgar Allan Poe. Lo, 'tis a gala night. Within the lonesome latter years, an angel throng bewinged and bedight in veins and drowned in tears, sat in a theater to see a play of hopes and fears, while the orchestra breathed fitfully the music of the spheres. Mimes in the form of God on high muttered and mumble low, and hither and thither fly. Mere puppets they who come and go, at bidding of vast formless things, that shift the scenery to and fro, flapping from out their cadent wings, invisible woe. That motley drama, oh be sure, it shall not be forgot, with a phantom chased for evermore by a crowd that sees it not, through a circle that ever returneth to a selfsome spot, and much of madness and more of sin, and horror the soul of the plot. But see, amid the mimic rout, a crawling shape intrude, the blood-red thing that writhes from out a scenic solitude. It writhes with mortal pangs, the mimes become its food, and seraphs sob at vermin fangs in human gore imbued. Out are the lights, out all, and over each quivering form, the curtain, a funeral pall, comes down with the rush of a storm, while the angels, all pallid and wan, uprise, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy, man, and the hero, the Conqueror Worm. All right, everybody, let's go. Spirits of the dead. Thy soul shall find itself alone, mid dark thoughts of grey tombstone, not one of all the crowd to pry into thine hour of secrecy. Be silent in thy solitude, which are not loneliness, for then the spirit of the dead who stood in life before thee are again in death around thee, and their will shall then overshadow thee. Be still. The night though clear shall frown, and the stars shall look not down from their high thrones in the heaven, with the light like hope for mortals given. But their red orbs without beam to thy weariness shall seem as a burning and a fever which would cling to thee forever. But 'twill leave thee as each star with the dewdrop flies afar. Ooh, good timing, Pom-Pom. I like that. Now our thoughts thou canst not banish. Now our visions never to vanish. No more like dewdrop from the grass, for thy soul shall they pass. A breath, the breath of God is still, and the mist upon the hill. Shadowy, shadowy, yet unbroken, is a symbol and a token. How it hangs upon the trees, a mystery of mysteries. Annabel Lee. It was many and many a year ago, in the kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee. With a love that the winged seraphs in the heavens coveted her and me. And this was the reason that, long ago, in a kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee. So that her high-born kingsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a tower in a kingdom by the sea. The angels not half so happy in heaven went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of a cloud that night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love was stronger by far than love, for those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea could ever decipher my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lay by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her tower there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. I don't think it's supposed to be tower. I think I fucked that up a little bit, but still. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly nodding, Slightly did there come a tapping. Suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. As distinctly I remember, it was in a bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly had I sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow. Sorrow for my lost Lenore, for the lost Lenore. For the rare and radiant maiden who the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore. The silken, sad, uncertain rustling of every purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terror never felt before. So that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor, entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor, entreating entrance at my chamber door. This is it, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," I said, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, so gently you were rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Ere I open wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more." Deep into that darkness peering, I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal had dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and only words there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore?" This I whispered, and an echo muttered back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard the tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," I said, "surely there is something at my window. Let me see then what thereat is, this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open then I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but then mine of lord or lady perched upon my chamber door, perched upon the bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sadness fancy into smiling, by the grave stern decor of the countenance it wore. Thou the crest be shorn and shaven, though," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Platonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little reverie bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast, upon the sculpted bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven sat lonely on his placid bust, speaking only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, only friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, Nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by the reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, I said, what it utters is only stock and store, caught for some unhappy master whom's unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his song one burden bore. Till the dredges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore. But the raven still guiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of the bird, and bust and door, and then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy upon fancy, thinking about what ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose to the fowl whose fierce eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloating over. It should be or, I believe. Gloating or. Those velvet, violet linings with the lamplight gloating over. She shall pass, nevermore. Then, methinks, the air grows denser, perfumed by some unknown censer, swung by a seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tuffled floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee. By the angels he thus sent thee. Respite, and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff, the kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, I say, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether temperer sent, or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is this balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, I said, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God that we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, who the angels named Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, who the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nothing more. Be that word our sign of parting, beast or fiend, I screeched, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's plutonium shore. Leave not black plum as a token that lie the soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thine beak from out my heart, and take thy form off from my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight over him streaming through his shadow on the floor. Streaming throws his shadow on the floor. My soul, from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor, shall be lifted nevermore. And there you go. Our final poem, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe.